Welcome to History Things with Pat. My name's Pat, and today I'm at Fort McAllister, which is outside of Savannah, Georgia. Fort McAllister is part of the greater defenses of Savannah, Georgia during the Civil War, 1861 to 1864. And it's here on December 13th, 1864, where Union General William Tecumseh Sherman will order a division of the 15th Corps under Brigadier General William B. Hazen and about 4,000 troops, or 3 brigades, to attack this Confederate garrison of roughly 400 men. Sherman's men on their march are in much need of supplies, and they're cut off from Union Admiral John Dahlgren, whose fleet is stuck out in the Atlantic Ocean. The fort here must be taken to open up a pathway to the sea, as the Ogeechee River connects directly to the Atlantic Ocean. The battle here will take roughly 15 minutes, and will open up a pathway to the much needed supplies and start to shrink the Confederacy as a whole. The Ogeechee River is a blackwater river that connects to the Ossabaw Sound and eventually to the Atlantic Ocean, the latter making it a necessary place to defend if you are the Confederate Army charged with the defense of Savannah, Georgia. Only 16 miles to the south of the major port city of Savannah, Fort McAllister was constructed in 1861 on the land of and named after Confederate Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Longworth McAllister, who would later go on to command the 7th Georgia Cavalry. This sand and earthen fort served to protect the southern flank of Savannah from the Union Navy, seeking to use the Ogeechee River as a backdoor in order to land soldiers for various offenses into the south. Just as important, the fort afforded defense to the area's several rice plantations, which provided critical food to the blockaded Confederacy. The fort was equipped with 10 large-caliber guns and facilities for creating hot shot that would set wooden warships ablaze when the superheated cannonballs came crashing down through them. The fort was made up of large sandberms designed to take considerable punishment from Union naval artillery, and that it certainly did, repelling 7 Union assaults between 1862 and 1863. The damaged earthworks were quickly repaired with the dirt and the marsh mud, while the fort's guns consistently drove Union naval vessels back up the river, even when attacked by the most technologically advanced ironclads such as the USS Montauk and the USS Passaic. Fort McAllister's simple construction was its strength and helped to keep it from falling into Union hands until the twilight of the war. However, it never fell to Union naval forces despite all the constant bombardment, a claim that nearby and supposedly impregnable Fort Pulaski could never make. Fort Pulaski was a stone and masonry fort that fell to the Union Navy on April 11, 1862, after only 36 hours of bombardment. But now, let's talk about when the fort actually did fall to Union forces in December of 1864. Union General William Tecumseh Sherman and his 60,000 men, comprised of the Army of the Tennessee and the Army of Georgia, is on the move. Capturing Atlanta earlier that year on September 2nd, his army departs Atlanta on November 15th on his famous March to the Sea. Their objective is to open a back door into the Confederacy through the port city of Savannah, Georgia. Desperate for supplies, his men need to open up an avenue to the Atlantic Ocean where Union Admiral John A. Dahlgren is waiting with the much-needed supplies and 6 weeks' worth of mail intended for Sherman's men. December 10th. After leaving much of Georgia in ruins, Sherman's army nears Savannah. Confederate fortifications around Savannah have prevented Dahlgren from linking up with Sherman and getting him the supplies he so desperately needs. As Sherman prepares to invest Savannah, his cavalry will inform him after reconnaissance of the nearby forts that Fort McAllister, being lightly defended, could be taken by a determined infantry attack. Sherman, realizing that if the fort is taken, the Union Army would control the Ogeechee River, giving him an avenue to the sea, finally connecting him with Admiral Dahlgren and his much-needed supplies. Sherman orders the Army of the Tennessee to reduce the fort. Major General Oliver O. Howard, in command of the army, selects the division of Brigadier General William B. Hazen to lead the attack. As the sun was setting on December 13th, Hazen's 4,000-man division formed into 3 brigades in the woods on the inland side of the fort. Sherman and Howard climbed to the top of a rice mill to observe the action. the USS Dandelion appears in the Sound, having received no word on the reduction of the fort. Sherman signals them that the fort is still in enemy hands, but would be theirs in a minute. Almost on cue, Hazen's men emerge from the woods. The advance is spaced apart so as to limit the effectiveness of incoming artillery. Confederate Major George Anderson and his garrison of 230 men will be overwhelmed within minutes. Charging through the abatis, Union soldiers bury torpedoes and soon breach the parapet. Flooding the fort with Union blue, the attack will last only 15 minutes. In the end, it's an overwhelming Union victory. Of the garrison's roughly 230 men, 48 are killed, 86 are wounded, and almost 200 are captured. Sherman is so overjoyed that he rows a boat down the river to the fort itself. When he arrives, he will learn that ahead of Sherman's arrival, the Confederate troops buried torpedoes in the ground surrounding the fort. Even though they would prove to be ineffective, Sherman is furious and orders Major Anderson and 15 of his men to remove the torpedoes with their bare hands. Anderson protests by stating that this was, quote, an unwarrantable and improper treatment of prisoners of war. His protests will fall on deaf ears, and the removal will go on without incident. In later years, military lawyers and international authorities would hold that General Sherman had gone beyond the rules of war by forcing his prisoners into such danger. Sherman would justify his actions by stating his concern was for the lives of his men, and that, quote, the fact that every torpedo was safely removed showed my reasoning was right. Confederate prisoners were then moved to nearby Lebanon Plantation as a collection point, which was ironically also the home of the Confederate garrison's commander, Major George Anderson. With his army now resupplied and on the move, and now in control of access to the Atlantic Ocean, Sherman and his army set their sights on Savannah, Georgia, a major port and a key to the Confederacy. On December 17th, General Sherman sends a message to Confederate General William J. Hardee that reads, quote, I have already received guns that can cast heavy and destructive shot as far as the heart of your city. I have also for some days held and controlled every avenue by which the people in garrison are supplied, and I am therefore justified in demanding the surrender of the city of Savannah and its dependent forts, and shall wait a reasonable time for your answer before opening with heavy ordnance. Should you entertain the proposition, I am prepared to grant liberal terms to the inhabitants and garrison, but should I be forced to resort to assault or to the slower and surer process of starvation, I shall then feel justified in resorting to the harshest measures, and shall make little effort to restrain my army, burning to avenge the national wrong which they attach to Savannah and other large cities, which have been so prominent in dragging our country into civil war. Instead of surrendering, Hardee and his men will leave across a makeshift pontoon bridge on December 20th. General Sherman and his army of 60,000 men will occupy the city of Savannah the following day.